05:17 hours, Strait of Hormuz. The Persian Gulf stretched flat and glass calm beneath a pale dawn sky as the USS Abraham Lincoln maintained station at 20 knots. Flight deck crews secured aircraft in precise rows while the carrier's escorts held tight formation. Radar scopes across the strike group showed only routine commercial traffic. Then, at exactly 5:18 hours, the E-2D Hawkeye reported a sudden swarm of 120 high-speed aerial contacts launching from the Iranian coastline. The threat identification unfolded in seconds. Each contact registered as an Iranian UAV of the Shahed family loitering munition type, low observable composite airframes carrying high explosive warheads and flying at 120 knots at 5,000 feet. The formation spread across a 15 nautical mile front in 4 staggered waves. Tactical action officers aboard the Lincoln classified the contact as hostile saturation attack intended to overwhelm the carrier's air defense envelope. Stakes escalated instantly. Coordinated UAV swarm of this scale could saturate radar channels, exhaust missile inventories, and deliver multiple impacts against the carrier's superstructure. The strike group commander ordered weapons free at 05:20 hours while the Lincoln increased speed to 28 knots and turned into the wind to launch alert fighters. At 05:21 hours, 4 FA-18E Super Hornets from VFA 211 climbed away from the carrier deck. Their pilots locked AIM-120 MRAM missiles on the lead Iranian UAVs, still 18 nautical miles distant. At 05:23 hours, the first AMRAMs left their rails. Impact in 31 seconds. Direct hits vaporized 6 lead drones and bright orange fireballs that lit the horizon. The remaining 114 UAVs continued their inbound track without deviation. At 05:25 hours, the guided missile destroyers USS John Paul Jones and USS Chung Hoon activated their AN/SPY-1 radars in full power mode and began ripple-firing SM-6 missiles from their vertical launch cells. Each destroyer expended 8 missiles in the opening salvo. At 05:27 hours, the first SM-6s reached their targets at 12 nautical miles. 23 Iranian UAVs disappeared from radar in successive white flashes. Debris trails began to streak across the sky. The tactical countdown accelerated. At 05:29 hours, the Iranian UAVs entered the 10 nautical mile ring. Their onboard guidance systems adjusted for terminal dive profiles. The Super Hornets completed their second pass, releasing AIM-9 Sidewinder heat seekers that shredded another 14 drones in overlapping contrails. The remaining 97 UAVs pressed forward. At 05:31 hours, MH-60R Seahawk helicopters from HSC-8 lifted off the Lincoln's flight deck. Each carried AGM-114 Hellfire missiles optimized for small airborne targets. The helos raced forward at 140 knots to establish an outer picket line. At 05:33 hours, the destroyers switched to their 5-inch guns for closer range engagements, walking rapid salvos into the descending swarm. 4 more UAVs disintegrated under plunging shells. 05:35 hours, the swarm crossed the 8 nautical mile line. The sky filled with the high-pitched whine of turbine engines. Super Hornets executed a third pass, expending their remaining air-to-air ordnance. 17 additional UAVs were obliterated in midair. Burning composite fragments rained into the sea below. At 05:37 hours, the formation split into 2 main prongs, attempting to bracket the carrier from port and starboard. The lead prong of 41 UAVs accelerated into a shallow dive at 140 knots. At 05:39 hours, USS Decatur fired a full salvo of Evolved Sea Sparrow missiles. 18 bright explosions lit the morning sky. Seahawks arrived overhead at 5:41 hours and began ripple-firing Hellfires. Each missile acquired and destroyed its target within 11 seconds of launch. 22 UAVs exploded in sequence, their wreckage tumbling downward in flaming arcs. The clock hit 05:43 hours. The remaining UAVs entered the 5 nautical mile envelope. Phalanx CI West mounts on every escort spun up with a mechanical scream. Gatling barrels whirred to life. At 05:45 hours, the first drones crossed into the 3 nautical mile kill zone. The sky erupted with tracer fire. CI West systems engaged automatically. Streams of 20mm depleted uranium rounds tore into composite airframes at 4,500 rounds per minute. Drones simply came apart in mid-flight, wings shearing off and fuselages shattering. 05:47 hours. The Iranian UAVs launched their final coordinated terminal attack. The Lincoln's rolling airframe missile batteries responded instantly. Every inbound drone within 2 nautical miles was engaged and shattered in midair. At 05:49 hours, the last wave of 29 UAVs converged from 3 directions at under 1 nautical mile. Machine gun fire from the escorts joined the fray while CI Westmounts walked continuous streams of fire across the formation. The sky erupted again. 31 impacts registered in under 40 seconds. Simultaneous detonations lit the water white with falling debris. At 0551 hours, Seahawk door gunners added suppressive 0.51 hours. Seahawk door gunners added suppressive 0.5 V. Taliver fire from above. Another 12 UAVs disintegrated under the combined weight of Hellfire and minigun fire. The final desperate sprint toward the carrier's flight deck ended at 552 hours when the Lincoln's own phalanx systems opened fire for the first time. The sound was a continuous metallic roar, every remaining drone vanished in a blizzard of high-velocity rounds. Hull fragments and warhead casings were hurled skyward before splashing back into a sea already choked with oil and composite wreckage. 0554 hours. Silence. Exactly 17 minutes after first radar contact, 120 Iranian UAVs had been destroyed. The Persian Gulf had changed forever in that span. Immediate aftermath assessment began at 0555 hours. The strike group reported 0 casualties aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln or any escort. Not a single Iranian UAV had reached the carrier's hull. Iranian losses stood at 120 drones obliterated, an estimated 240 Quds Force and IRGC operators lost in the launch and control chain. Rescue operations proved unnecessary. No debris required recovery for threat assessment. MH-60R Seahawks conducted rapid sweeps of the battle space and confirmed no floating ordnance or secondary threats. The carrier resumed normal flight operations at 0605 hours while escorts maintained a protective screen around the expanding debris field. Silence returned to the strait 18 minutes after initial contact. Strategic ramifications cascaded across the region within hours. The tactical lessons were immediate and unambiguous. Saturation UAV tactics that once threatened to overwhelm capital ships had been rendered obsolete by layered network defense systems and rapid response air assets. The engagement demonstrated that even a numerically superior Iranian aerial swarm could not penetrate the defensive envelope of a modern carrier strike group when that group operated inside its optimal battle space. Doctrinal shifts inside the U.S. Navy accelerated. Planners began integrating even more autonomous counter-drone systems and directed energy weapons into future escort packages. Regional reactions proved equally swift. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates issued statements of full support for freedom of navigation while quietly requesting expanded U.S. presence in the Gulf. Israel placed its forces on heightened alert along the northern approaches. Iran's leadership at Tehran remained silent for the first 12 hours, then issued a carefully worded denial claiming the UAVs were conducting routine training exercises that encountered mechanical failures. Independent satellite imagery told a different story. This engagement fundamentally reshaped the calculus of aerial confrontation in the Strait of Hormuz. For years, Iranian strategists had invested heavily in low-cost drone swarms precisely to counter American naval superiority. The destruction of an entire 120 UAV strike package in under 17 minutes exposed the limits of that doctrine. Future Iranian operations would likely pivot towards submarine ambushes, coastal missile batteries, and cyber-electronic warfare. Yet each pivot carried its own vulnerabilities. The United States had reaffirmed that the strait remained open not through negotiation but through demonstrated capability. Allied navies took note. Insurance rates for commercial shipping through the Gulf dropped within 48 hours as confidence in U.S. protection returned. Long-term, the event served as a deterrent template. Nations that once considered swarm attacks viable now recalculated the cost-benefit ratio and discovered it no longer favored the attacker. The tactical execution itself offered textbook validation of joint force integration. Air assets established the outer screen, surface combatants provided the middle layer, and close-in systems delivered the final hammer blow. Every second of the 17-minute timeline reflected years of training, billions in investment, and the seamless fusion of sensors, weapons, and decision-making. Commanders later described the engagement as a near-perfect demonstration of escalation dominance, the ability to absorb an attack and respond with overwhelming measured force that ended the threat without expanding the conflict beyond the immediate battle space. In the weeks that followed, the U.S. Navy released declassified footage and engagement data. Analysts worldwide studied the engagement envelope, the exact timing of weapons release, and the split-second decisions made aboard the Lincoln's Combat Information Center. The data reinforced a single overarching truth. Modern naval power projection rested not on the size of the carrier alone, but on the invisible web of destroyers, aircraft, helicopters, and automated defense systems that surrounded it. Iran had tested that web with 120 UAVs and discovered it was unbreakable. The Strait of Hormuz remained open. Oil continued to flow. Global markets stabilized. And the message echoed across every literal command. Any attempt to close the world's most vital maritime choke point would meet the same fate. The USS Abraham Lincoln and her escorts had not merely survived, they had rewritten the rules of engagement in the Persian Gulf for the foreseeable future. 17 minutes of concentrated violence had delivered a verdict that no press conference or diplomatic note could ever match. The carrier continued her patrol as if nothing had happened, yet everything had changed.